and welcome to the Healing for the Heart podcast, People Just Like Us. We are celebrating at Healing for the Heart this year. It's been a bit of a long year of celebrations as we've thought about the fact that we are 5. We've just been chatting about that. So we're doing this podcast today. Jodie and Donna and I are here because we are the folks who have been here for the last 5 years. We remember 5 years ago, as far as Healing for the Heart is concerned. And we've been thinking about the journey that we've been on as an organisation over the last 5 years. We were actually trying to think about where we were 5 years ago. So physically, 5 years ago, we were in 2 wee offices in the midst of an industrial estate in Whiteinch, out in South Street. And that just seems like a million years ago, apart from anything else, doesn't it? What are your memories of the... maybe I shouldn't ask. What are your memories in terms of the space that we were in South Street?
It was really small, actually. We had two rooms in a kind of outer space, didn't we, where there was a desk, and there was a big whiteboard on the wall, which said at the top of it, "Please lock the inner door," which I always quite enjoyed. And yeah, it was just, it's wild to think that that's where we were. That's the space that we took up in the world. And there was that fire escape as well. Do you remember the fire escape, which used to make some quite odd noises when it was windy, and occasionally used to leak?
Yep, and the water would come under the door. And then we had folk move in up the stairs from us who were running a recording studio, and so we were trying to facilitate counselling sessions in the room down the stairs, while whatever it was that they were recording, rap-wise or anything else, was reverberating above us. And then they didn't use the internal stairs, they only used the fire escape stairs, so you would hear them running up and down the stairs in the fire escape. How on earth did we actually manage to do anything?
Well, it was was it a recycling facility it was next to as well?
That's right.
So you'd be sitting with somebody and there would be a sudden, bang, clang, and it would just go on while they were crushing the recycling bits or doing whatever it was that they were doing. And it became one of those things that you tuned out, actually. So it became one of those things that you just didn't really notice.
The clients noticed it. And then the yard as well had, it was the bus depot, and so if you were trying to get to your car, there was tons of parking, but if you were trying to get to your car or people were trying to get in, they were running the gauntlet of the buses that were coming in and running into the bus depot. And of course the space was so small that we really didn't have any room to do any kind of community development, because we'd have been sitting on each other's knees trying to do it. So what did the community development look like at that point? Can you remember that far back?
Back then, I only had one group. One group. Now there's about 6 groups, and we were confined just to a group room space, but it was an open space. So we were confined to that space, and we weren't really in the community. A lot of the time now, apart from 2 of the groups, we are out in communities, actually doing stuff in the communities and not necessarily confined to that one space, I think, and that one group.
And that was really just, we were kind of at that were we at that actually for a year before COVID hit? So we were kind of in that space, trying to do the thing, trying to work out whether or not how we did this thing, because we had been a project of another charity, so we had a whole ton of governance stuff, a whole ton of backroom stuff that we'd never had to do before. So we were trying to work out how all of that worked, and we got 18 months or so down the line. We employed our first administrator, and Jan came to work with us, and Jan came in the August, and then the pandemic hit in the March, and that was just like...
I tell you what, there was in the car park though, there was a great snack van. Do you remember that snack van? And she was lovely. She'd give you a cup of milk if we didn't have any milk, for 20p or something like that. But she did amazing bacon and egg rolls.
Totally. And always had a queue. People actually came along it wasn't just the people in the complex. People came along the street to get their bacon and egg roll. And then of course COVID hit.
And I remember standing in the office and being like, right, well, we better take all this stuff home, but we'll be back in 3 weeks.
And so we packed up with the thought of, we'll be back shortly. We gave Jan the plants to look after because we didn't want to kill them, and we thought we'll take Jan home with the plants and we'll go and pick her up in a few weeks' time, and then that was how long? How long did we spend?
We were out of a space together for over 18 months.
Yeah, 18 months, 2 years, yeah.
So we moved all of the clinical work online. The inner healing eventually moved online. And the community development, you were doing some wild stuff with the community development.
I'm like trying to think, what, how did I survive that, or what was I actually doing? But it was out.
You were doing doorstep stuff.
It was outside. Yeah, it was out. It was a lot of outdoor stuff. It was like garden projects and wax melts and delivering Christmas boxes and a lot more stuff out in the community and not in the office.
Yep. And actually trying to see that folks could use Zoom. So trying standing at the end of somebody's garden with them on their phone and you on your phone trying to explain to them which buttons to push in order to get on. That was you forget that so quickly, don't you?
Do you remember we sent every single client a care package?
Yep.
I remember my house being full of them for days.
And at that point we had 40 clients.
Oh, I mean,
tops.
Can you imagine trying to do it now? That would be even more epic.
Yep. And so we all that stuff with COVID and whatnot, we eventually came back into the space and started to bring people back, looking at whether or not we needed to have screens or whether or not we were wearing masks or whether people could come, and all of that stuff we negotiated.
But we did that sooner than I thought. When I was thinking about this, I thought, oh gosh, we didn't do anything in person for 2 years, and actually that's not true. I think it was January 2021 that we came back in, and by that point we'd knocked down some walls and we'd knocked down a wall and put a wall up to change the space. And I remember, I think I went in 2 mornings a week because we had trainees who really needed to see people in person. And so that was what we did. And we had a big clear shower curtain because we were using the leaky fire exit door as our entrance. And we had this big clear shower curtain that sat in front of the reception desk so that the germs couldn't get through. It's absolutely wild to think about it, isn't it?
I'd completely forgotten about the shower curtain, but that's because we had to have a one-way system so that people weren't coming in one door and out in 2 tiny wee room. And it's just that it's absolutely crazy to think that we actually did all of that stuff.
And the group room disappeared. The space that I used for the group room, that disappeared, and then we went into one part of the building.
That's right.
With two offices and the reception desk.
And then we had that funny third room that had been created that you did use a little bit for groups, but it wasn't massive, was it?
No.
And there was a whole thing about how could you socially distance, and you had to be quite careful about where everybody sat.
And the groups got smaller. I had to reduce the group numbers to allow people to have adequate space in the room that we had.
Yep. And then it was about trying to work out, well, if we're going to do this, do we do it in the community and what does that look like? And so gradually after COVID, you had the partnership with the Heart of Scotstoun and started to do some stuff in there and built up a bit of a wellbeing cafe in that space for a while as well. Yeah,
wellbeing cafe. We've done a reconnected event to figure out where people were at with their mental health and well-being and what the community needed and how we could respond to the community.
Do you remember before though, because we'd been in those 2 rooms and we'd been thinking we probably need to find a space, like if this is going to be a charity that works, we probably need more than 2 rooms and a desk. And so we looked at various spaces, and do you remember we looked? It's funny what happens, isn't it? And it's funny how things happen and then don't happen, and then what transpires from that. So we looked at that, and it was an amazing space. We looked at that amazing wee space in the city centre. It was on St Vincent Square, I think, and it was being used by Brewdog. And it was lovely. They had a little dog that ran around, I remember, and we went in and we were trying to work out how would we make this work and how many counselling rooms would we have, and we would still have only had 2, maybe 3, but then there would have been office space to work. And we were kind of really pursuing that, and then it just went silent. We were like, what is going on? This has gone silent. And then within like weeks of that, COVID hit properly, and that was it. We would have
Yeah.
so we would have been lumbered with a building that we couldn't do anything with, and that actually, as a result of the growth that we experienced during COVID, would have not been fit for purpose straight away.
That's right. That was actually that was Christmas 2019.
Yeah.
That we were looking at that space.
Because it was cold, I remember that.
Yeah. And then we came back into January and it had all just disappeared. It had all just died a death. And then, of course, then COVID hit and nothing was ever the same again. It's amazing when you actually start to think of that, all the things that we've actually forgotten as we've come through.
Definitely, I was just thinking that.
Yep. But all the way through, so we came through COVID, and then at the end of COVID, when things had just exploded in terms of numbers that were accessing our services, both our clinical services and also the community development had ramped up as well. And it's like, so where do we go now? And we'd pursued space. This is all about space. We'd pursued space up in the West End. And that kind of that disappeared overnight as well for us. You know, there was not, all of a sudden it was not possible anymore. And then the guys in the Clutha Trust were in here and had offered us space in here, and we've been here since 2 years now, actually.
Yeah.
2 years past last month.
And I had COVID, so it had all just fallen apart where we'd been looking.
That's right.
And you phoned me and said, there's the opportunity of this place. Jan and Donna and I are going to go in, and you gave me you gave me a video tour, didn't you? Because there were 2 different floors that we were looking at, because we were still at a point where I was isolating and I couldn't leave the house.
And you didn't like it at first?
I didn't like it at first. No, I thought it was far too corporate. But actually it was a huge gift. And I think also in some ways it's hard to see when it's a funny thing, isn't it, when you're seeing something on video and everybody else is there and you're like, this is a bit weird. And there's always that disappointment when the thing that you thought was going to be the thing isn't the thing, and you're like, oh, so now I have to recalibrate my head, so maybe this is the thing. And I think we talked at the time, didn't we, about this being a real resting place for us, and actually a moment where we could just go, okay, so this is where we are for now. This gives us options, and it gives us time to work out kind of who we are. Because essentially we'd been our own charity for 18 months. So at that point you're still really still trying to work out what does it look like to do this. And then the whole world changed overnight, and essentially was like that for us for another 18 months. And then we got in here and it was like, okay, we need to figure out, what are we doing? Who are we now? Because the world has changed and we were so new in what it was that we were doing. And now we're pushing 4. And what does that mean?
And I guess also in that there are still questions for us round about who are we, where are we going, what it is we're doing. But when we stand here and kind of look backwards over the last 5 years, and you see the phenomenal growth that there's been, so those 2 wee rooms in Whiteinch, even looking at the space in St Vincent Square or St Vincent Place that we looked at, where we thought we'll maybe get 3 counselling rooms in here, we're sitting with 6 counselling rooms, plus now the group room that's in here, plus 2 sites in local communities, in fact 3 sites in local communities that we're delivering work in. And you look and you think, my goodness, standing back there, how could we would never have seen that we would have done what we've done, because at that point we were saying to ourselves, my goodness, are we going to survive? Can we survive COVID? Can we survive being a charity by ourselves? Is anybody ever going to want to fund us? It's that great big funding word again. And it's like, you look back and you think, good grief, we've actually come quite a distance in all of this, haven't we? And I suppose I don't know if you've got a story, if you can think of a story that we were chatting as a staff this morning about the stories. What are the stories that we hang on to, that keeps us going? What is there a story that's a highlight? Is there something that's a highlight for you of the last 5 years that you just like look at and you think, gosh, that really is the thing that sticks in my mind? Go on, you're laughing.
Donna.
Should they say the old school sports day and watching everybody bounce about in sacks? No, but I think for me it's the community events and actually seeing the full community coming together and not just working in silos like this is mental health and this is addiction and this is well-being, and it's about doing events and seeing the whole community come together.
Yeah.
You know, local businesses, charities, organisations, the general public, people that use the space, people mental health, people in addictions, and everybody coming together for the one common goal. And I think COVID took a lot of that away for me. You know, the events, which is really disappointing, but that's one of the highlights that I've definitely found here, the community events and seeing the full community come together. I mean, irrespectful of that, you've got the transformative change that an individual makes coming through Made for More project, coming through creative writing, coming through the compassionate conversations groups that we do. So you've got the individual changes, but when everybody comes together and you're part of that, it's just been the highlight for me.
Yeah, and I think you know, there's lots of stories and people that I can think of that I think, wow, what a transformation that's been. I think the ones that really probably touch my heart most are the stories of people that actually we could both tell, because they've been part of the whole of what we do. So they haven't just been in the counselling service or just been in community development. Actually, they've been in both, and it's been the whole of what we do that has actually been utterly transformational and done incredible things. And even just talking about it, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, because actually the stories that we could tell are just like, they are actually life-changing, and they're actually life-saving, aren't they? And they actually, it's that ripple effect. Like, we know of people who have had their lives so utterly transformed, but it's not just them, because none of us exist in a silo. So it's that person, and then it's all the people around about them. It's their families and their kids and their kids' pals and all of that changes.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think as I've thought about it, I mean, and we've talked about this before as well, that one of the things where obviously we talk about being an organisation that's underpinned by faith, but we've really struggled, and I've really struggled at how you articulate that, and how you articulate it in a way that it doesn't alienate anybody. And I suppose one of the things that really stands out for me is so we remember during COVID, towards the back end of COVID, we put together an online retreat space where we had just a whole ton of folks who contributed to that in terms of talks or meditations or whatever. And we just put it out there and said, you know, this online retreat space is available for you. It was free. People didn't have to pay anything. They'd access to all the videos. They could work through them at their own pace and all the rest of it. And in actual fact, what came back from that, actually lots of that came back via our inner healing team, and the real positive stuff that came back from that, where people were saying, I want to talk about spirituality, and that recognition that came actually a lot of the time from the recovery community, that people really wanted to talk about it. And it's that actually, but being a space and holding a space here where it's okay for folk to talk about that. And I don't mean it's okay for folk to talk about their Christian faith, and it is obviously, but actually it's okay for you to talk about your spirituality. It's okay for that to be part of your recovery and part of your well-being. And how do we support you in that? And I guess as I reflect on the last 5 years, and even in the conversation that we're having just now, I think what sets us apart in many ways is the fact that we do have that holistic approach, that we're not just a counselling service, that we're not just a community development service, that we're not just a faith-based service or a prayer service, but actually we recognise that for people it's that whole thing, it's the all-round thing. And what does that mean? And that doesn't mean that we necessarily need to provide everything for people, but it's that recognition that we're talking about a whole person here. So we're not just talking about them getting clean, we're not just talking about them getting their well-being or their mental health sorted out. We're not just talking about them getting their spirituality or their faith sorted out, but we're talking about how all of these intertwine and knit together. And it's about the whole person that we're looking at. I guess that probably leaves us with the thought, well, where next? Where are we going in the next 5 years? And I don't know that we have an answer to that just at the moment. It's something that we're working on. I guess, you know, I would say to folks who are listening or watching that we do have big dreams. We do have big plans in terms of what we want to do.
Yeah.
We are a small organisation. If you compare us to like the big national charities, we are really small. But we do actually punch well above our weight in terms of the impact that we have, as many smaller charities do. And I suppose I would want to land this podcast on the place to say to folks, if you're watching or you're listening and you actually have heard this and are inspired by where we've been over the last 5 years, and you want to help us to be in a new place, in a different place, in a more transformational place even in the next 5 years, then we would love to have you partner with us. We asked in our social media campaign running up to Christmas, are you ready? And that's the question I'd want to ask again. Are you ready? Are you ready to actually be part of the change, to be part of the transformation that we see in lives every day? Are you ready to do that? And perhaps as you watch this, you're thinking, you know, I own a business and we really could get behind this. We'd love you to get in touch with us. You're maybe thinking, you know, I could spare £2 a week or £2 a month. We would love you to get in touch with us. You're maybe thinking, actually, I've got some time in my hands. I could lend the skills that I've got to help this organisation get to a place where even more people have stories of transformation. Then get in touch with us, because we would really love to hear from you. You know, are you ready to be part of this? You know, we're not ready to stop being part of this. We as a staff team have been talking about what it is that keeps us doing this, and it's the transformation in lives that keeps us doing this. So I'll leave you with the question, are you ready? The details for how you can get in touch with us will be in the blurb that goes out with this, wherever you're watching or listening to it, and we're waiting for you to get in touch with us.